Right now, as you lie in the dark, there is a cold, heavy drop in your stomach, a tightening in your chest that whispers, you are running out of time. You might have spent the last hour scrolling through notices of other people's milestones, their promotions, their houses, their marriages, their seamless arrivals. And now you are left with the agonizing sensation of being permanently out of sync. It feels as though everyone else received an instruction manual for life that you missed, and you are left lagging behind, stranded on a track where you are forced to run a race you never chose to enter. This is the quiet torment of comparison. It is the exhaustion of looking at where your peers have landed and feeling a sudden paralyzing shame that says your own life is small, delayed, and fundamentally insufficient. Outside your window, the evening has turned a deep bruised charcoal, and the scent of damp earth and fermenting fallen leaves rises from the soil. The room around you is cooled by a slow, creeping draft that smells faintly of old pine wood and wet stone. There are no bright screens here to remind you of what you lack. The simple, heavy shadows on your wall do not move. With urgency, they stretch out slowly, resting against the dark wood of your floorboards like a mountain ridge settling down for the winter. In this space, the ticking of the world's clocks has faded. There is no one here to grade your progress, no one to measure your harvest, and no one evaluating whether you have accomplished enough for your age. You are completely unobserved by the horizontal world. If it feels right, take a slow breath into the very center of your belly, letting the air widen your lower ribs without any rush. You do not need to force anything to change in your chest right now, and you certainly do not need to convince yourself that you are successful. What you are feeling in this moment is not failure. This profound sense of being left behind is not a defect in your soul or a sign that you have ruined your potential. It is simply the natural friction of a river that has been forced out of its own bed, trying to twist itself into a shape that belongs to someone else entirely. Tonight, we will not force the mind to be silent, because a mind that feels late cannot be quieted by an order to rest. We are simply going to change the valley we are standing in. There is a surprising, brilliant paradox at the heart of our self-doubt, one that ancient Buddhist insight gently offers to a tired mind. The torment of comparison does not happen because your life is actually lagging behind. It happens because you have fallen for the illusion that there is a single, linear track that all human beings must walk together. We look at the visible harvest of another person's field, and we assume that their soil, their sun, and their winter are identical to ours. But the teachings remind us that all things manifest according to their own highly specific, distinct causes and conditions. Trying to match your timeline to theirs is like criticizing a pine tree for not blooming in the early spring, like a cherry orchard. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of your own ground. Dear friend, right now, maybe you have felt this too, that exhaustion that comes from continuously altering your internal current to match the formal garden layout of the world around you. We spend our days diverting our natural stream into artificial bamboo channels and stone troughs, straining to make our water flow uphill just to reach a terrace that we were never meant to irrigate. When we do this, our energy grows thin, shallow, and muddy. We lose the deep, slow power of our own movement because we are too busy trying to mimic the rhythm of a neighbor's channel. You do not have to solve your whole life tonight. You do not have to find your true path before the sun rises. You are safe enough to soften right now. Nothing is required of you. Now. Absolutely nothing. The fields outside do not apologize for being dark and bare. In the middle of November, the cold soil does not feel shame because it is not currently pushing up bright green shoots. Your life is allowed to have its hidden seasons, its long winters, and its slow, quiet periods of decay, where nothing visible is being produced. Your worth is not a score calculated by your arrival at a specific milestone before your youth fades. Slowly, the wisdom of the earth becomes personal as we let our awareness drift away from the digital notifications and the phantom schedules of your peers. Imagine yourself standing at dusk on a very narrow, cold terrace field halfway up a jagged mountain ridge. The air here is sharp, smelling of wet compost, old pine bark, and the dull, metallic scent of an iron hoe resting against a grey schist stone. The light is a fading, watery silver, and below you, the deep valley floor is already filling with a thick, white mountain fog that obliterates all paths. A few paces away, sitting on an unpeeled log near a leaking green bamboo pipe, is an old herbalist named Master Soun. He moves with a deliberate, slow-motion grace that makes him look as though he belongs to the mountain itself. He does not carry a watch. He does not ask you how much work you completed today. And he does not look across the valley toward the wealthy farms on the sunny southern slope. He simply listens to the steady, cold drip of water escaping from a crack in the bamboo conduit at his side, waiting to see if you are ready to drop your tools and look at the actual ground beneath your feet. As you step closer to the leaking pipe, the mud squelches softly under your boots, grounding you in the cold reality of this specific ridge. Soun does not offer you an inspirational phrase or a lesson on success. Instead, he reaches down into the dark mud with his bare, soil-stained fingers, pulling up a wet segment of split bamboo that has been jammed awkwardly between two heavy stones. This is where we begin to see what has happened to your own internal current and what we must learn to release before the deep sleep can find you. The mountain mist drifted across the narrow terrace, swallowing the rough edges of the stone walls until the earth below seemed to dissolve into an ocean of quiet grey. Master Soun held the wet segment of split bamboo in his weathered hands, his thumb tracing the rough, fibrous tear where the wood had split completely against its grain. The water within the broken channel did not flow smoothly. It hissed and foamed, spilling over the side into a patch of bitter, dry dock weeds. Leaving the lower terrace parched and dark, he looked across the vast chasm of the valley, toward the southern ridge, where the wealthy farms still caught the very last glint of winter sun, then turned his gaze slowly back to the young man standing beside him. In this very district, Soun began to speak, his voice slow and low like the grinding of grain. On a heavy granite wheel, there lived a young farmer named Jiro. He had inherited a small, cold plot of land on this northern slope after his father passed away. It was an uncelebrated terrace, sitting entirely in the long shadow of the high mountain peak, where the soil was dense with black muck and heavy with schist stone. Because the sun reached this ridge 2 hours later than the rest of the valley, the earth remained chilled, wet, and late to awaken each spring. Jiro was an earnest worker, but a bitter poison had taken root in his mind. Every morning, as he stood with his iron hoe in the cold mud, he would look directly across the valley at the farm of a man named Kenji. Kenji's terrace sat on the southern slope, perfectly positioned to catch the first warmth of the dawn. By midsummer, Kenji's rice stalks were already tall, thick, and flushing with an enviable, bright gold, while Jiro's field showed nothing but small, pale green shoots, barely rising above the cold water. A heavy, suffocating envy began to consume Jiro's chest. He felt an agonizing shame whenever he passed the village market, convinced that the elders were looking at his slow fields and judging him as lazy or incompetent. He began to believe that his entire worth as a man was being measured against Kenji's early harvest. Driven by a frantic desperation to catch up, Jiro decided he must alter the very nature of his land. If his field would not grow fast on its own, he would force it to match the rhythm of the southern slope. He spent weeks constructing an intricate, aggressive system of irrigation. He went into the mountain forest, cut down the tallest, straightest green bamboo stalks, and split them down the center to create a network of artificial water conduits. He tore his natural stream out of its ancient, winding earthen bed, a bed that had been formed by centuries of slow water, finding the lowest hollows, and forced the current into his rigid bamboo pipes. He built stone troughs to carry the water across high, unnatural ridges, trying desperately to flood his terrace with a fast, high-pressure torrent that mirrored the irrigation system he had observed on Kenji's farm across the chasm. But the mountain would not be managed by his panic, because the bamboo had been cut in a hurry and forced to bend around angles. It was never shaped to endure. The wood began to resist. The conduits groaned under the pressure of the mountain runoff. The split sections did not align with the slope of Jiro's specific hill, causing the water to foam, break, and leak through 1,000 fine cracks before it ever reached the soil. The constant, turbulent, rushing of the constrained water washed away the delicate topsoil of his terrace, shallow mire of thin grey mud where no seed could find a hold. He was working until his palms were raw and bloody, yet his land was becoming more barren by the day. One evening, as the first autumn frost began to whiten the tips of the mountain grass, Jiro dropped his hoe into the mud and fell to his knees beside the primary bamboo pipe. He was completely broken by fatigue. His chest felt tight, filled with a cold, vibrating anger at his own ground. He had sacrificed his sleep, his peace, and his health to match the timeline of a man who did not even know his name, and his reward was a ruined terrace and an empty barn. It was then that Master Soun walked up the steep path from his herbal hut, carrying nothing but a small iron knife, used for digging roots. He did not scold Jiro for his ruined field, nor did he offer him empty encouragement about next year's crop. Instead, he knelt in the cold mud beside the young farmer, reached out and tapped his fingers against the split bamboo conduit that was vibrating with the frantic, foaming water. "Listen to the sound within this wood, Jiro," Soun whispered, his eyes fixed on the leaking seam. "Tell me what the stream is doing." Jiro wiped the sweat and dirt from his forehead, leaning his ear close to the green bamboo. The water inside did not have the deep, musical gurgle of a natural brook. It sounded like a trapped animal, a sharp, screeching hiss as it was forced through an opening too narrow for its volume, spraying cold droplets against his cheek. "The bamboo is split against its own grain," Jiro said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "It is trying to carry the water to a high ridge where the mountain never intended a stream to go. It is breaking itself just to mimic the flow of the valley river. Soun nodded slowly, his fingers releasing the pipe. You have spent the entire season trying to irrigate a southern terrace while standing on northern soil, the old man said softly. You have torn up the deep, slow current of your own ground because you were terrified of being late. But this bamboo does not fail because it is weak. It fails because it is being forced to live another path's conditions. Your water has become an anxious torrent that can hold no life because you have forgotten how to let it find its own hollow. Jiro looked from the leaking, vibrating wood down to his own raw, calloused hands, and then out at the dark, empty terrace that had been stripped of its soil. In that quiet, frozen moment, as the evening mist settled heavily on his shoulders, a profound wave of emotional recognition washed through his soul. He saw that his suffering was not caused by his slow rise or his shadowed ridge. It was born from the exhausting daily act of forcing his life through an artificial channel that did not belong to his true nature. He had turned his own spirit into a broken pipe, trying to carry a harvest he was never meant to grow. As you lie here in the quiet of your room, let that image of the strained, leaking bamboo rest in your awareness. Notice how it fractures when it is forced to cross a hill it does not belong on. You do not need to patch your broken pipes tonight, and you do not need to force your life's stream to reach the high ridges before the morning comes. You can simply allow the wood to rest in the mud, letting the frantic rushing slow down to a quiet, natural trickle. The deep chill of the mountain night settles completely over the empty fields, holding the earth in a dark, motionless embrace that feels ancient and unhurried. As we sit with the memory of Jiro's fractured bamboo conduits, the imagery begins to press gently against the edges of your own silent midnight struggles. This old story is not telling us to stop feeling, nor is it asking us to become cold and indifferent to the progress of our lives. It is not an invitation to give up on our dreams, to discard our aspirations, or to live without purpose in the world. Instead, it is showing us something much quieter, a profound shift in our internal climate that allows our natural energy to return to its deep, unforced power. When we look into the center of our exhaustion, we find that the suffering we carry was not born solely from being behind or missing a milestone. The deepest ache was created by the specific way the mind held what happened. In the language of the awakened heart, what we often describe as attachment is not a beautiful expression of high standards or devotion to growth. Attachment is that cold, tight panic in the pit of your stomach that says, if my life does not look exactly like theirs by this specific year, I am invisible, I am unsafe, and I am fundamentally unworthy of belonging. It is the desperate grip that turns our natural desire to flourish into an artificial, rigid pipe that cracks our spirit from within. We call this craving not a hunger for physical luxury, but a desperate, exhausting thirst for confirmation that we are running fast enough to justify our existence. When you spend your night replaying the successes of your peers, looking for the exact reasons why you are lagging behind or feeling guilty for your quiet seasons, you are dragging your life's current up an impossible hill. You are forcing your stream through a channel split against its grain. One of the greatest insights of ancient wisdom is that we cannot always control the first pain, the raw reality of our conditions, the late seasons, the cold northern slopes, or the setbacks that life throws across our path. But we can learn to stop adding a second wound to the first. The second wound is the one we inflict on ourselves when we judge our unique ground as a failure because it is not currently producing a golden harvest. True mindfulness, when translated into the language of your tired heart tonight, is simply the newly discovered ability to observe a panicked thought without immediately treating it as an absolute truth. It is the capacity to notice that someone else is blooming beautifully on their southern slope and to watch their gold happen, without letting it turn into a silent condemnation of your own dark muck. You can appreciate their arrival without choosing to tear up your own earthen riverbed to mimic their rhythm. When you practice this, you begin to cultivate an inner surface that resembles the natural, winding channel of the valley floor. You become spacious. You allow the timeline of others to exist. You acknowledge it with immense grace, but you do not allow its friction to split the bamboo of your own mind. This brings us to the gentle, unburdened truth of impermanence. No season lasts forever, and that includes the long, cold shadow that has been hanging over your life lately. Your slow period, your sense of delay, your time of feeling unfulfilled. These are not permanent defects, they are simply temporary weather moving over your specific coordinates. The sun will reach your slope in its own time, according to its own natural geometry, not because you forced it to rise early with your anxiety. Letting go does not mean you suddenly stop caring about your life or that you abandon your garden to the weeds. It simply means you release the extra, unrequired struggle of trying to live someone else's conditions. You drop the illusion that you can speed up your growth by punishing your soil. Is the wide, quiet space of this mountain ridge that can hold both the golden terrace and the dark frozen hollow without taking sides. It is the part of you that is listening to this voice right now, the steady, untouched observer that remains completely free from the metrics of the horizontal world. You are not the runner. You are not the latecomer. You are not the broken channel that must be continuously repaired. You are the deep earth itself, which knows how to hold the seed through the freeze without once doubting its capacity to break open. When we touch this space, true compassion finally becomes an intimate reality. Compassion is not a soft sentiment, it is the immense, immovable courage to let your life be exactly where it is tonight, without turning that placement into a reason to hate yourself. But the young farmer had not yet discovered how to stay whole when his fields became completely empty, just as it may still be difficult for you to soften while your life feels unsettled. It is easy to understand the wisdom when the room is dark and the world is asleep, but the true transformation happens when we learn how to hold our emptiness when the frost arrives, as our boat of awareness drifts further into the violet shadows of the night. Let these reflections bring you closer to the immediate reality of your own body. You have spent so much time living in the imaginary future of your comparisons, tracking the arrivals of people miles away, that your own skin has felt like an unfamiliar house. Now let this clarity come home, moving down past the thoughts and the schedules, directly into the heavy, quiet truth of your breath and the bed where you rest. If it feels right, let your awareness gently slide down from the horizontal world of schedules and deadlines, settling directly into the immediate, physical chamber of your chest. There is absolutely no need to force your breathing to slow down by an act of will, or to demand that your body achieve a state of perfect porcelain stillness right now. Instead, you might simply observe the unforced, natural weight of your breath as it fills the back of your lungs, widening your ribs slightly against the surface beneath you. Notice how each inhalation arrives with a subtle, cool spaciousness, like mountain air passing over damp moss, and how each exhalation carries away a tiny fraction of the heat your nervous system has stored throughout the day. Even noticing this single shift is entirely enough. Perhaps you can locate the specific places where your body is surrendering its weight to the fabric of the bed. Feel the heavy, dense curve of your shoulders sinking down, the flat expanses of your thighs relaxing, and the back of your head resting fully in its place. As you follow the rhythm of your chest, see if you can invite the very small muscles around your jaw to unlatch. There is an ancient, tight guarding. We hold there a subtle clenching of the teeth that comes from constantly trying to outrun our own lives, trying to brace ourselves against the feeling of being left behind. Let that armor drop. Allow the skin across your forehead to become smooth and soft, like the surface of a dark pool when the evening wind completely dies away. Now, without any trace of frustration or self-judgment, notice one specific thought or comparison that has been persistently asking for your attention tonight. It might be the remembered image of a peer's recent success, the heavy anxiety of an upcoming milestone you feel unprepared for, or that low-grade guilt that whispers you should be much further along in life by now. Do not try to push this mental visitor out of the room, and do not try to use your willpower to crush it. If we fight our worries, we are merely applying more pressure to our internal channels, causing the splits in our spirit to widen. Instead, just let this thought be seen exactly as it is, holding it with a quiet, spacious permission. Imagine that you are holding that long segment of split green bamboo that Jiro laid down in the mud. Feel the rough, fibrous texture of its edges, and notice the fine, weeping cracks where the water has been foaming and spitting under pressure. In your mind's eye, see yourself taking this current worry, this heavy, frantic urgency to catch up, and placing it gently into the hollow center of the bamboo pipe. Watch the liquid of that anxiety enter the wood, filling the broken channel until it reaches the absolute edge. Notice what happens as you hold this image in your imagination. You do not need to patch the cracks with your bare hands, and you do not need to force the pipe to become straight. You are simply the observer, looking directly at the strained channel, without allowing its turbulence to become your true nature. The urgency belongs to the artificial race. The bamboo belongs to the mountain. You are simply the space that allows both to exist. You are letting the frantic current rest inside the wood, without letting it seep into your bones. Now, if it feels right, imagine leaning down and setting that split bamboo pipe onto the cold, wet earth of a completely separate mountain valley. Let your fingers slowly release their grip on its sides, allowing your hands to open wide in your bed, palms facing upward toward the ceiling. Watch what happens in the darkness of your mind when you stop trying to manage this path. The pipe rests quietly in the black mud and very slowly, carried by the slow, natural contours of the mountain slope, the frantic water inside begins to lose its pressure. The rushing slows down to a rhythmic musical gurgle, then to a quiet trickle, until it drops its artificial constraints entirely. Watch the image change as the valley fills with a thick, protective mountain fog. The sharp lines of the bamboo lose their definition in the grey mist. The worry becomes smaller, turning into a faint shadow, then into a quiet whisper, until it merges completely with the vast, uniform stillness of the earth. The mountain is wide enough to hold 1,000 broken channels, without its own deep foundation being shaken. You do not need to watch the image vanish completely. You can return to the heavy, grounding safety of your own breath whenever you are ready. There is an immense, unburdened freedom in allowing yourself to realize that your life does not have to be an arrow flying towards someone else's target. Tonight, your only assignment is to let your stream find its own natural level, undisturbed by the speed of the world outside. You do not need to heal your entire timeline before the sun rises, and you do not have to force a sudden emotional breakthrough, simply resting your attention on the unhurried edge of your own skin is a profound form of wisdom. You are drawing your energy back from the horizontal world, allowing the internal current of your spirit to pool in your chest, soft, dark, and perfectly valid in its own quiet space. But the old herbalist has not finished his work on the ridge, and the young farmer's transformation had a much deeper layer to reveal when the winter frost finally hardened the ground. In a moment, this journey will take us into a season of deep darkness, where we will discover how a seed can grow without a single drop of sunlight. For now, let your ribs expand into the cool, dark room, feeling the absolute luxury of being completely unmeasured by anyone, anywhere, for the rest of this night. The darkness thickened until the jagged peaks above the terrace were swallowed entirely by the velvet sky, leaving only the sound of the freezing mountain wind rattling through the dry reeds. Bold. Master Soun adjusted his heavy wool cloak, his eyes reflecting the soft, faint grey of the frozen mist that hung over the valley. He gestured toward the lower ridge, where the mountain path dipped into a deep, jagged cleft that never saw the noon sun. When the winter finally locked the province in ice, Soun continued, his words falling slowly into the cold night air. An unseasonal, early blizzard struck the northern slope. The temperature dropped so fast that the mud in Jiro's fields froze into hard, iron-like ridges overnight, splitting the roots of his late-planted rice shoots before they could mature. Across the valley, Kenji's southern terrace, having already completed its early golden harvest, sat safe, dry, and filled with abundant grain, while Jiro's storehouse remained completely bare. This was a much harsher blow than the simple envy of summer. The threat of actual, physical hunger arrived at Jiro's door, accompanied by a profound, suffocating sense of failure. He felt as though the mountain itself had rejected his labor, punishing him for his delay. He spent 3 days sitting on the cold timber floor of his empty barn, his hands tucked into his sleeves, his mind trapped in a fierce, looping nightmare of resentment. He replayed every choice he had made, comparing his frozen mud to Kenji's warm barns, until his own thoughts felt like shards of sharp glass, cutting his throat from within. He was convinced that his slow timeline had made him completely worthless to his village. On the 4th morning, a faint knock sounded against his wooden door frame. It was not Kenji coming to gloat, nor was it an elder coming to judge. It was Master Soun, holding a small iron trowel and an old, cracked clay bowl filled with a handful of small, hard things that looked like tiny chips of charcoal. They were bitter, black wild iris seeds, gathered from the highest, coldest crevices of the northern summit. The old herbalist did not offer a word of pity, nor did he tell Jiro that his ruined field was a hidden blessing. Instead, he pointed his trowel toward the darkest, wettest cleft of the north-facing cliff behind the barn, a spot where the sun never reached, even in the height of midsummer. "Come, Jiro," Soun said simply. We must drop these into the frost before the hard freeze sets in. Jiro followed the old man into the shadow of the cliff, his knees trembling from days of fasting and despair. The ground here was black muck mixed with sharp granite gravel, smelling faintly of rot, cold iron, and old mold. Jiro looked at the black seeds in the bowl, his voice tightening with a raw, desperate frustration. Why should we plant anything here, Master? This dirt is dead and cold. It has no light. If my rice could not survive the shadow of this ridge, how can these bitter seeds grow? They will rot in the dark, while Kenji's fields are warm and finished. Soun stopped beside a massive moss-covered boulder that leaned over the wet cleft like a frozen wave. He knelt down, using his trowel to scrape away a layer of crisp white frost, opening a small, narrow trench in the black, frozen mud. He took a single black seed from the bowl and placed it gently into Jiro's palm. Look at its skin, Jiro, the old man instructed. Tell me how it feels. Jiro pressed his thumb against the tiny seed. It was not soft or smooth, like a grain of rice. Its hull was thick, stone-hard, and completely unyielding, with a rough, wrinkled surface that felt like a tiny piece of mountain schist. It is locked, Jiro whispered, a cold drop of moisture falling from his nose. It feels like a pebble. No shoot can break through a skin that tough. Soun took the seed from Jiro's hand and dropped it into the freezing black mud, covering it with a handful of sharp gravel. These iris seeds carry a peculiar nature. Jiro, the old man said, his voice dropping into the deep silence of the cliff. If you plant them on the golden, sunny terraces across the valley, they will rot within 3 days. The warmth of the southern slope softens their skin too quickly, causing the inner core to decay before it can wake up. They require the intense freezing cold of this northern shadow to crack their hulls. The long winter freeze is not their enemy. It is the precise condition required for their unique strength to open. Without this darkness, they can never bloom. Jiro stood frozen under the overhanging boulder, the wind whipping his torn robes against his ankles. He looked down at the small patch of black muck where the seed had disappeared. He did not experience a magical, sudden erasure of his hunger, and his frozen rice fields did not miraculously turn to gold. The reality of his difficult winter remained exactly as it was, cold, uncertain, and demanding. But as he stared at the dark earth, he made one small, subtle shift within his own chest. He took a long, slow breath of the freezing air, feeling the icy expansion in his lungs. And he stopped resisting the darkness of his specific ridge. He stopped the habit of treating his envious thoughts as absolute commands. He recognized that his long winter, his delay, and his shadowed path were not failures of growth, but the precise environment his unique soul required to break its own hard shell. He stopped trying to be a cherry orchard on a northern slope, with his fingers still red from the frost. Jiro reached down, took the clay bowl from Soun, and began to carefully place the remaining black seeds into the frozen trench, one by one, covering them with the cold black mud with a slow, disciplined precision. He was no longer running from the shadow, he was inhabiting it. He was choosing to sit with the uncertainty of the winter, forgiving his ground for being late without pretending the frost did not hurt. He returned his attention completely to the soil beneath his boots, releasing his grip on the golden fields across the valley. As you rest in the safety of your dark room tonight, let that image of the wild iris seed settle into the deep soil of your own heart. Notice how it does not fight the freeze, and how it does not apologize for its thick, hard skin. You do not need to bloom before the sun rises, and you do not need to prove your worth by escaping your current shadow. You can allow the winter of your life to be exactly as cold as it is, trusting that the darkness is doing a work. Accomplished. The silent, unmoving air of your bedroom holds you in a deep cradle of shadow now, as if the dark itself is inviting you to drop the remaining weapons you have been using against your own history. In the quiet expanse left by the story of the cold iris seed, we can begin to untangle the intricate, heavy knots that keep your mind racing while the clock moves steadily toward morning. It is not the external fact of your current delay that drains your spirit. It is the secondary world of mental friction you build around that delay. We spend our nights constructing elaborate courts of judgment within our own thoughts, trying desperately to rehearse the future and replay the past, operating under the exhausting belief that if we can just scold ourselves enough, we will somehow force our lives to bloom faster. When you lie awake, measuring the distance between where you are and where you think you should be, you are engaging in a silent, punishing resistance to reality. You are telling the current moment that it is fundamentally forbidden to contain darkness or uncertainty. This constant, desperate craving for approval turns our inner evaluation into an insatiable phantom. We look at the achievements of others, and we allow their timelines to become an indictment of our own worth. We try to fix our exhaustion through shame, whispering that our slowness is a failure of character, until we have turned our temporary winter into a permanent identity. We stop being a human being who is experiencing a slow season, and we become the latecomer, the left behind one, the person who is always watching from the cold ridge. This is where the ancient, clear-sighted psychology of the Buddha offers a profound doorway out of our self-made prison. Speaking in a language that understands the immediate ache of your heart tonight, the teachings show us that every human life is touched by two distinct forms of discomfort. The first pain is simply what life brings: the sudden, unseasonal frost, the late dawn of the northern ridge, the real financial hardship, or the simple, neutral fact that certain things take a long time to grow. This first pain is clean. It is the raw, unedited landscape of a world we do not control. It contains no cruelty and no personal verdict. It is simply the weather of existence. The second pain, however, is entirely what the mind throws over that landscape. The second pain is the bitter layer of self-condemnation, anxiety, and comparison that we pour into our own wounds. It is the voice that insists your unique timing is a defect and that you must mutilate your own nature to catch up with a crowd that is walking a completely different valley. We cannot always stop the first pain. We cannot force the sun to alter its course across the peaks, nor can we prevent the arrival of a difficult winter, but we can absolutely learn to stop feeding the second pain. We can stop throwing our own internal life force into a frantic, artificial pipe that is split against its grain. True peace, when met in the deep darkness of this room, is never the complete eradication of difficulty. It is not a pristine, imaginary terrace where no shadows fall and every seed sprouts instantly. Peace is simply a fundamentally altered relationship with that difficulty. It means looking at the dark, cold muck of your current life and choosing to meet it the way the wild iris seed meets the frost. It means letting the shadow be exactly as deep as it is without converting that darkness into a reason to hate your own progress. When you allow your unique season to unfold, without the added torment of comparison, the exhaustion in your nerves begins to drop away like frozen mud falling from a spade. Have you ever wondered what happens when you simply grant your life permission to be late? What happens when you drop the requirement to match the golden harvest of the southern slope before this month ends? The universe does not collapse. When you step out of the horizontal race, it simply continues its ancient, unhurried expansion without your panic. Your drive to constantly monitor the pace of your peers is not proof of your ambition. It is merely a fearful attempt to protect yourself from the deep vulnerability of having an unmapped life. As we allow these truths to sink through the layers of your exhaustion, the sharp, frantic quality of your thoughts begins to lose its grip. You are not required to love the shadow, and you do not need to pretend that your uncertainty feels pleasant. It is simply the current texture of your ground. In a moment, we will look at how this ancient clarity shows up in the small, mundane frictions of your next morning. But for right now, let your spine sink heavily into the mattress, feeling the immense relief of knowing that you do not have to be an early harvest to be whole. You are allowed to be the seed that requires the dark. Now let this ancient clarity step down from the mountain ridge and noisy spaces of your modern daily life, moving out of the frozen valley and directly into the small, fragmented moments that test your spirit between sunrise and dusk. True, inner alignment is not something we save for a quiet walk in a forest. It is practiced in the very ordinary, friction-filled intervals of your routine. It is found in that brief, suspended second before you unlock your phone to check for a notification that hasn't arrived. Or when you are sitting at your desk, staring at a blank screen, trying to maintain a pleasant smile, while feeling an immense, cold heaviness inside your chest. Think of how many times a day your internal current begins to foam and fracture because you are tracking the visible milestones of people on a screen, or because you are trying to manage the unexpressed thoughts of a coworker, a friend, or a partner. We spend our precious hours replaying a minor misstep we made during a brief lunch conversation, or comparing our slow, hidden progress with the polished, loud arrivals of those who seem to move through life without a single delay. We carry a constant, phantom guilt that tells us we are permanently lagging behind, that we are not enough as we are, and that any hour we spend resting must somehow be paid for through a prior state of complete exhaustion. But look at what happens when you bring the memory of the cold, hard iris seed into these small, vibrating moments of your afternoon. You begin to realize that a single breath taken before you answer an urgent request is not just a pause. It is a profound form of personal wisdom. It is the moment you step out of the artificial race. You are choosing to care deeply about your world, without gripping its timeline so tightly that you tear your own skin. You can offer your presence to a project or a relationship without allowing the frantic speed of the market to dictate the rhythm of your heart. Not every urgent thought that crosses your mind deserves your blind obedience, and not every heavy feeling you experience is a command to go out and repair your entire destiny. When your mind whispers that you are failing because someone else has achieved their harvest early, you can treat that thought like water striking the split bamboo conduit. Let it exist. Let it be loud. Let it be exactly what it is. but let it flow past your center and drop down into the grass without altering the deep, natural bed of your stream. You do not have to build a fortress around every comparison that flies your way. You can want rest without needing to justify its necessity to anyone, including your own internal critic. You do not need to wait until your body collapses or your mind goes completely numb before you are permitted to set down the iron hoe. Rest is not a luxury you earn by matching the output of the southern slope. It is the natural, quiet ground that allows your unique nature to survive the winter. When you step back from the urge to be everything to everyone, you are not abandoning your field. You are simply ensuring that there will be a living seed left beneath the frost to wake up when the true spring arrives. Tomorrow, when the alerts flash, or when you feel the old impulse to check your progress against the world's clock, remember that your life is allowed to be late. You can look at the gold across the valley with immense kindness. You can celebrate their arrival, but you do not need to mutilate your own roots to match their season. You can establish a clear, quiet boundary within yourself that says, they are blooming in the sun, but I am strengthening my hull in the shadow. Slowly, the rhythm of this night is shifting, drawing you further away from the demands of the horizontal world, the small details of your day, the unanswered messages, the complex goals, the fears about whether you will ever arrive are all losing their sharp, punishing definition in the dark. In a moment, our journey will reach its final, deepest destination, where the mountain stream drops its boundaries entirely and dissolves into the absolute stillness of the earth. Let the weight of your timeline slide down into the floorboards, knowing that for the next few hours, your slowness is the most beautiful thing you possess. The mountain wind has dropped its voice completely now, leaving the dark ridge in a state of absolute, motionless clarity where the mist no longer moves against the pine needles. Every horizontal comparison you carried down to this bed has been dissolved by the heavy, freezing dampness of the night, leaving only the clean, unblemished space of your own quiet form. The artificial channels have been completely unlinked, for the current itself has stopped its striving, allowing the water of your spirit to slide down into the deep, dark hollows of the valley floor, where no metrics exist and no one can come to measure the pace. Your breathing has become very quiet now, a slow, rhythmic softening that feels less like an effort and more like water slowly seeping through the rich, dark peat of a massive, silent bog at midnight. With each long, unforced exhale, your limbs are becoming heavier, sinking into the mattress, as if the clay of your body is finally returning to the cool, ancient earth that knows exactly how to hold a seed through the winter. The fine weeping splits that you carried through the bright afternoon are closing, sealed by the absolute darkness and the thick, protective boundary of this silent room. There is nothing left to hold up. The stream of your awareness has dropped its rigid bamboo pipes, resting on a surface that has no urgency, reflecting nothing but the deep, velvety blackness of a sky that has forgotten how to be fast. You have been given full permission to be entirely late tonight. You do not need to keep watch over the southern slope, and you do not need to ensure that your harvest matches the wealth of the valley before the sun rises. The iris seed is deep beneath the frost, and the entire northern ridge is sleeping under a heavy blanket of grey shadow. Let your chest widen into the cool air one final time, feeling the immense luxury of a ground that is completely unobserved, unmeasured, and exempt from the requirement to produce a single green shoot for anyone else. The achievements of your peers have been released from your grip. The timelines you feared have been dropped into the cold mud. The roles you played to feel enough have been unbuckled and left on the path. You are allowed to stop surviving the world's clock for tonight. You are allowed to return to the deep, dark winter that existed before you ever learned how to feel behind. The bed beneath you is steady, a solid foundation of schist stone and moss that requires no management from your tired mind. Let the truths you have heard tonight sink past your thoughts, past your self-judgments, down into the deepest marrow of your bones, turning into a warm, heavy stillness that will keep your roots intact until the true spring arrives. The night is wide, the earth is cold, and your unique nature is entirely valid in its delay. What if the long shadow you have been fighting all this time was never a prison, but the cold, protective soil that your soul specifically chose to crack open its hardest shell? The cold darkness stretches out from that question, filling the crevices of your room like slow water. Finding the low hollows of an ancient stone wall, it is a stillness that does not urge your mind to, nor does it look for an intellectual resolution to the years you spent running. It simply hovers around your shoulders, thick and heavy, allowing the frantic architecture of your comparisons to lose its remaining density. The image of the north-facing cliff remains with you, in the quiet, a vast, dark shelter, where the earth does not apologize for its shadows. In that cleft, the soil does not strive to become sunlit before its time. It does not look across the chasm to see if the southern terrace has a better name, or if the golden stalks are receiving more praise from the passing merchants. It rests completely in its own chilly moisture, unhurried, silent, and perfectly continuous with its own winter nature. You can feel the luxury of that unhurried ground as your weight settles deeper into the fabric of your bed. There is a soft, unfolding space in the center of your lower belly, a complete release of that tight, hidden anchor that usually keeps your nervous system vibrating with the speed of the world. That tightness was the physical shape of your envy, the muscle memory of a stream trying to force itself over an impossible ridge to prove it isn't late. But tonight, the ridge has vanished. The mattress beneath your limbs is entirely steady, absorbing your fatigue without requiring you to justify your placement on the earth. You can let go of the perimeter of your achievements. You can let go of the invisible yardstick you have been using to measure the depth of your own life. In the quietest currents of the awakened mind, we are reminded that our true nature is not the rigid bamboo pipe that fractures under pressure, but the fluid, adaptive water inside that knows how to find the lowest, darkest hollow and rest there without shame. The pipe may crack, it may rot in the mud, and it may fail to reach the high fields where the artificial garden was planned. But the water itself remains permanently unhurt, completely unchanged by the speed of its flow or the height of the terrace it touches. Tonight, you are returning to that water. You are moving your sense of self away from the fragile, brittle tubes of status, age, and public arrival, and you are resting as the deep, dark current that flows beneath the ice. Let your breath become even quieter now, a faint, almost invisible tide that moves through your body like the slow seeping of winter moisture through a cedar root. You do not need to pull the air in with a sense of urgency, and you do not need to push it out as if you are running out of time. The body knows exactly how to navigate its own internal seasons. just as the mountain knows how to hold the snow, and the wild iris seed knows how to sit in the black mud for months without losing its core. There is absolutely nothing for you to calculate in this room. The peers who occupied your thoughts during the day are sleeping under their own roofs, surrounded by their own private trials, dealing with the unique conditions of their own ground. Your anxiety cannot speed up their dawn, and your self-condemnation cannot heal your own delay. You can let them have their gold while you claim your shadow. Imagine the bitter, black seed of the iris, one last time, not as a symbol outside of yourself, but as the very density of your heart tonight. Its hull is so thick, so completely hardened by the cold wisdom of this mountain, that even the sharpest sting of someone else's success cannot pierce its boundary. The gold across the valley may shine. It may illuminate the entire southern ridge, but it cannot make this seed rot. It cannot force an early blossom that would wither in the winter air. When the true season arrives, the shell will crack from within, naturally, quietly, according to its own organic rhythm, leaving you whole, rooted, and beautifully aligned with your own ground. You do not need to mimic the blossom of the cherry tree to know the power of your own root. The house around you has dropped its last daytime echo now, the distant sounds of the streets fading into a soft, uniform blanket of quiet that matches the slow thrumming of your pulse. Your tongue is soft against the floor of your mouth. Your throat is entirely relaxed, and your eyelids are resting with a heavy, leaden weight, no longer searching the dark for a sign of where you stand. The future is an unformed landscape that does not require your mapping tonight. The past is a fallen leaf that cannot be greened again by your sleeplessness. Both are completely irrelevant to the immediate, dark reality of this cold air moving through your frame. Let yourself sink an inch further into the dark, feeling the immense relief of being entirely left behind by the world's clocks. No one is tracking your arrival here. No one is comparing your score. No one is evaluating your timeline, and no one is demanding that you explain why your fields are still bare. You are completely anonymous in this winter. Your value has returned to its natural, unearned state. The same silent worth of a boulder leaning over a creek or a flake of frost settling onto the black muck of the cliff as the final embers of your resistance turn to cool ash. The image of Master Soun and the young farmer Jiro dissolves entirely into the dark wool of your room. The terrace is gone, the iron hoe is gone, and the split bamboo pipe has vanished into the grey fog. There is only this mattress, this rising chest, and the vast, unburdened spaciousness of a spirit that has finally stopped trying to force its own spring. Sleep is not a destination you must earn. Through a day of perfect progress, it is simply the natural closing of the seed when the darkness becomes total. Let the night fold over you like wet earth over a resting root. And as you drift into that deep, undisturbed stillness where no metrics exist, let this one final truth rest against your chest. You were never meant to be a uniform crop growing on a predictable slope. You were only ever meant to be the deep, patient earth that knows how to winter its own holiness. The stillness that follows that truth is not a hollow or empty vacuum, but a vast, heavy quiet that spreads out to touch every corner of your sleeping room. It is the exact texture of an ancient forest floor in the dead of winter, where the fallen leaves have turned to rich, dark compost, and the earth beneath is silently, slowly absorbing the autumn rains into its deep, secret heart. You can feel that. same steady absorption occurring within your own awareness. Right now, the sharp, frantic signals of the day, the mental tabulations, the digital echoes, the calculations of how much faster you must run tomorrow, are all being pulled down into the heavy loam of your physical frame, losing their electrical sting, turning into a soft, uniform weight that presses you gently into the center of the bed. We have lived for so long under the exhausting illusion that our life is a single, narrow path where everyone is running toward the same crowded finish line. We have allowed ourselves to believe that if we do not reach a specific coordinate by a certain year, we have somehow squandered our potential or been excluded from the warmth of the valley. But as you lie here in the dark, the deep, unhurried truth of our interconnected world begins to wash over your tired chest like a cool mountain stream finding its natural level. It reminds you that the trees on the northern slope do not spend their winters weeping, because the valleys below are already green. They do not force their sap to rise through the ice just to prove they are alive. They know that their late blossom is not a mistake. It is the natural, beautiful consequence of their specific ground. Think of how much energy it has taken to constantly defend your timeline, to pretend that you are perfectly content when your inner current is foaming with anxiety, or to try to stretch your natural capacity until your nerves are frayed like old hemp rope. That performance is what splits the bamboo of your spirit. That is the internal friction that tears the delicate lining of your peace. But tonight, there is no requirement to perform. There is no one asking you to be successful or fast or settled. You are allowed to be completely unformed in the dark. You are allowed to let the cracks in your plans remain wide open, because the darkness of this night does not want to inspect your progress. It simply wants to wrap its cool, dark cloth around your weariness until the heat of your horizontal race has completely died away. Let your attention rest for a moment in the very palms of your hands, noticing the subtle, cool space between your fingers. These are the hands that have reached for reassurance, that have held the heavy iron tools of your daily labor, and that have scrolled through the endless, glowing notices of other people's arrivals. They have been active, gripped, and busy for hours, trying to construct a fortress of security out of an unpredictable world. Notice how they feel when they are completely empty, resting flat on the sheets with the fingers slightly curved and relaxed. They are holding absolutely nothing. They are not grasping at a single person's approval. They are not trying to adjust a single milestone on your calendar. They are as soft and neutral as two stones resting at the bottom of a deep, unmoving well. As your hands soften, let that same quality of absolute surrender travel up through your wrists, your forearms, and settle into the heavy, wide slope of your shoulders. The raw bruising left by the invisible yoke of comparison is beginning to cool. The phantom weight of the neighbor's harvest is gone. You do not have to carry the water across the unnatural ridges tonight. The mountain is at peace, the terrace is dark, and the winter gates are closed against the rising wind. The world is perfectly capable of turning on its axis without your supervision, and your peers can navigate their own paths while you drop into the dark mud of your own rest. Consider the immense, quiet sanity of the wild seeds that Master Soun buried under the frost. They did not survive the winter by striving to reach the light early, or by complaining about the thick, hard texture of their hulls. They survived because they trusted the cold. When the heavy, freezing thoughts of your own delays strike your mind tomorrow, You do not need to build an aggressive wall of defense or throw yourself into a frantic panic to catch up. You can simply allow your inner landscape to become spacious and hollow, like the dark cleft in the cliff. Let the successes of others enter your awareness and pass straight through without leaving a single trace of envy on the mirror of your soul. You can be the dark ground that allows all things to grow in their own time, remaining completely unmoving and whole at the center of your life. The air in your bedroom seems to grow cooler, more protective, wrapping around your face like a soft, dark silk that has been washed in mountain water. The rhythm of your heart has settled into a deep, slow thud, a steady and comforting beat that has been keeping time for your life since before you had a name or a destination. It does not ask for your opinion on whether you are successful. It does not require you to achieve a specific status before it keeps you alive. It functions perfectly well in the deep, dark chamber of your chest, entirely independent of your social comparisons and your midnight fears. You can trust its rhythm. You can trust the deep intelligence of your nature to repair your spirit while you are away in the dark. Let go of the need to have a clear blueprint for your next decade. You do not need to figure out how you will catch up or how you will explain your delay to the people who expect more from you, or how you will navigate the complex demands of the upcoming season. Those choices do not belong to the midnight hours. They belong to the light. And when the light arrives, the clarity you need will emerge naturally from the reservoir of this deep rest. To try to fix your life while your spirit is exhausted is like trying to clear a muddy pool by stirring the water with a stick. You must let the movement stop first. You must let the sediment settle to the bottom until the liquid becomes perfectly clear and still. Feel the heavy, soothing drag of sleep, pulling at the very edges of your awareness now, like a slow tide, gathering up the loose gravel on the shoreline of a dark lake. The words you are hearing are no longer concepts to be analyzed. They are simply a low, rhythmic frequency that is gently rocking the hull of your resting body. The bed beneath you is completely safe. The darkness around you is deep, wide, and completely supportive. It holds your weight without asking for a single word of justification. It does not care about your productivity, your age, or your arrivals. It simply carries you because you are a part of this earth. Let your consciousness dissolve entirely into that supportive depth. You are returning to the ancient, subterranean well, where all individual streams find their rest. You are sliding past the layers of grey stone, past the frozen roots of the cedar trees, down into the pristine, untouched stillness of the deep ground. In that space, there is no leader, there is no follower, and there is no race. There is only the boundless, dark peace of a spirit that has finally remembered how to be completely still within its own skin. And as the last trace of the waking world fades into the winter fog, let your heart rest in the absolute safety of its own unhurried nature, knowing that nothing you survive today has the power to diminish the pristine, beautiful truth of your unique timing. What if the emptiness you have been running from was never a sign of failure, but the wide, open valley where your soul finally learns how to rest without asking for permission from the world?